Hello, DawgNation, and welcome into DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation insider Connor Riley. Connor, just like me, I know you're a big fan of music, so I was hoping to start by asking you a question, and that is, what is your favorite one-hit wonder of all time?
Ooh, of all time, I might go Flagpole Sitter by, I believe it is Harvey Danger. The All American Rejects did a cover of it recently that I very much enjoyed, so I'm gonna go with Flagpole Sitter.
The reason that I asked this is because if you would have asked me the same question this time last year, I would have told you it was Funky Town. But as of this moment, it might be Zachariah Branch, who officially declares for the NFL draft. It was really kind of expected, but it still hurts Georgia fans to see him go. I've seen a lot of it on social media, and I kind of fear that there will never be another Georgia player who can make a single season impact the way that Zachariah Branch did this year.
Yeah, the bar has been raised in terms of what Georgia looks for out of the transfer portal. Zachariah Branch did everything that he was asked. He turned those Mike Bobo screenplays, which I know drives Georgia fans crazy, into really successful plays, consistency. Set the single season reception record, rewrote the record book here in his one time at Georgia. Going to go on, I think, to be a top 50, potentially even a first round pick. You could not ask for more from Zachariah Branch and what he meant, not just to this Georgia offense, but I think to this entire Georgia team in 2025.
I did not think about it like that. Yeah, there is probably no person that should be more thankful for Zachariah Branch than Mike Bobo. But in this age of the transfer portal and the way that college football is consistently changing, I think that Zachariah Branch is the perfect example of when a transfer portal pickup works out. Because Trevor Etienne was great last year, but Zachariah Branch was somebody that we talked about, but maybe not as much as some of the other transfers, and how quickly he was able to adapt, not just to what was going on the field and the scheme, but also the culture of Georgia and the representation of that. I think he represents every good thing about the transfer portal that sometimes it's hard for us to see.
Yeah, this is a guy who came to Georgia with a lot of question marks, had a little bit of a reputation from his time at USC, and I think wiped away all that with a spectacular season here in Athens. And I think he resets sort of what Georgia looks for in the transfer portal. And I think the success of Zachariah Branch this season might end up showing Kirby Smart that, hey, you can be a little bit more liberal in terms of who you want to get out of the transfer portal and how you want to use that, because there are players, in my opinion, like Zachariah Branch, who are going in every single year that can help you. Maybe not to the example Branch himself did this past season, but ones that can help this Georgia roster.
It's one of those things that you hate to see him go, but you love to watch him leave. So this is really a big thank you off the top to Zachariah Branch, and he's actually going to help us out later in the show. So let's go ahead and get to it. This is DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
It's the first show of 2026 and really the turning page of a new season already. So we're really going to take today to look back on the season that just ended, and maybe it was abrupt in some ways, but really the focal point is going to be reflecting on the good moments and maybe the things that are really hard to remember at this point in time. So we'll do a whole discussion on that and hear from Zachariah Branch. Then we will do our Dog Bites segment where we'll talk about transfer portal, draft declarations, and also preview the two Final Four games taking place. Then, as always, it's Meme Machine, and then we're going to do a Tired versus Wired end of season edition because there has been a lot of reactions to the way things that played out. But let's start with this. I know that maybe it feels like this conversation is happening way too soon. People are still licking their wounds from the end of the season and asking what went wrong. And it's hard because for somebody like Kirby Smart in this Georgia program, once you win back-to-back national championships and multiple SEC championships, the bar is just set so high that not winning a national championship feels like a disappointment. But looking back on the season from start to finish, I don't think people should jump the gun just yet on this season being a major bust.
No, this team accomplished a lot this season, and you can go back and check our shows and the way we talked about this team. For a long time, it didn't feel like a team that was going to win a national championship, and they found ways to keep winning. They picked up big wins. They did technically beat every team they played this season. You know, ultimately it comes to an end with a loss to Ole Miss, but you beat Alabama, you win an SEC championship, and in doing that, you know, I feel very differently about this Alabama program moving forward because of that Georgia game and because of the hold, admittedly, I believe that Alabama had over this program. That's gone now because of the success of this season. You win in Rocky Top, and for the last time for a while, because Georgia's not set to go back there until 2029, you continue to win against Auburn and Florida, who, by the way, have fired coaches and are moving on to new eras. So they still accomplished a lot. And I held this belief at the beginning of the season. It admittedly changed when they beat Texas and Alabama in the manner in which they did. I always thought that the 2026 team was going to be better positioned to be a national championship winning team just with what they potentially had coming back. And Georgia did a lot of things in this season that I do think set themselves up to be very successful once again in 2026.
Yeah, so I want to go back to the immediate aftermath of the Sugar Bowl because I think in my time with DawgNation and as a reporter, it was one of the first moments where I genuinely had no idea what to ask the players. I knew emotions were really running high, and I just thought, what do you even say to them? And so I thought our very own Jeff Sentell did a good job of asking the right questions, including asking Zachariah Branch what this team should be remembered for, and this was his response.
Yeah, man, we were a special team. We did a lot of things that, some teams didn't get a chance to do. Back-to-back SEC championship champions. And, I guess nobody's beat Alabama in the SEC championship, they said. So, we did a lot of historic things, man. A lot of guys, put their life on the line, put their bodies on the line, most importantly to get back for these games, like Kobe, like, Ethan Barbour and things like that to, really strain their bodies to try to get back for the team. It's something that, it should be remembered for sure. A lot of those guys didn't have to do that. They could have just made sure they took the safe route and just, made sure their bodies were straight and things like that. But they want to play for this team and they want to go out there for this team. So this team is a team that, has team camaraderie and we really love each other, a true bond. So I feel like that's something important that a team has to have in order to win games, and I feel like this team should be remembered for that.
Okay, number one, that was the perfect response from Zachariah Branch. So I kind of just want to go in order of the things that he talked about. And one of the things that you even touched on was don't let the loss in the Ole Miss rematch distract you from the fact that Georgia beat Alabama in the rematch for the SEC championship. Most people didn't want Georgia to play in the SEC championship either because of what happened last year or because they knew who the opponent was. And then I remember after the game talking to some Georgia fans, and a lot of people said it was the happiest that they had ever been because they finally got it done. Last year's team couldn't beat Alabama. 2023 couldn't beat Alabama. 2017 couldn't beat Alabama. And you could make the argument that all of those teams were, number one, more experienced, and number two, had more natural talent across the board. So the fact that this team was able to be the one to do that, that is definitely something that this group should be remembered for.
And it's something that I think as Georgia moves forward and the confidence they gain from that game, I think will be more fondly remembered, along with the fact that, who knows what the future of the SEC championship looks like as they consider tinkering with the college football playoff formula and thus conference championships in that manner. So for Georgia to go out there and win the SEC once again, and look, maybe the SEC isn't what it used to be, especially I think at the top of the league, but for Georgia to still go out there in a 16-team conference with no divisions, because for so long we heard, Georgia's only getting to the SEC championship because of the fact that they were playing in the East. That is not true, as they've gone through and they've beaten Alabama, a team that won a college football playoff game this year, and they beat Texas, a team that won 2 college football playoff games a year ago. I know the losses in the college football playoff are disappointing, and I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. But for all that this Georgia team accomplished this season, especially with how young this team was going into the year and what they're potentially set to retain for next season, I think that sets this team up for a lot of success while giving this 2025 team something to be awfully proud of, something that can never be taken away from them.
Yeah, and one of the other things that he talked about was injuries. Now, every team has injuries. It's a part of the game, but the guys that were injured never quit. I mean, never did I think we would see the day that Colby Young came back or Ethan Barbour came back, but they did. And even thinking back to the beginning of the season with the offensive line who had a different starting rotation for like 6+ games, it paved the way for a lot of young guys to be able to step in. And they ended up becoming one of the most consistent groups for the Georgia offense through the stretch of the season. So the fact that a lot of these guys fought their way back and then young guys shined in their presence when they couldn't play, I think it said a lot about the identity of this team.
Yeah, you look at a guy like Rayshawn Dinkins, a guy who, we didn't think much of when he first got here in the summer. He's starting the SEC championship game and college football playoff game as his first two starts. And now with Janelle Aguero entering the transfer portal, he's set to play a much larger role for Georgia moving forward. So I think the way this team handled adversity all year, I think kudos to them for how they played through it. And again, those injuries, while yes, that hurt them in the short term, you think, what could this team have done? I think if they had Drew Bobo at center in that college football playoff game. But moving forward, that's going to help them going into next season. And it goes to show just the strength and resiliency that this team showed. And I think, as you highlighted there, Kaylee, no one deserves that more than Colby Young. This was a guy who last year he was suspended due to an off-field arrest. Comes back this year, plays really well for the first half of the season. Suffers a leg fracture that would have been really easy for him to shut down and sort of withdraw from the program. He remains engaged. He fights his way back. Plays, I think, a pretty important role in that college football playoff win over Ole Miss, or loss to Ole Miss rather. And you wonder sort of, and I think maybe this speaks to the tenor of the season, what could have been if he had been able to play.
Yeah, and I think that Colby Young is a really good example of kind of the last point that Zachariah Branch made. And perhaps this is the most important and the one thing I really don't want to get lost in the midst of everything that's happened. This team was easy to root for because they rooted for each other. It was not hard to tell at the end of last year that something about the team was off. The chemistry this year was just absolutely undeniable, and it made them hard to root against, even if you aren't a part of DawgNation. Even though there were some stressful games at the beginning, the energy of this team was infectious and made fans more invested over time, which I feel like has been really difficult to do in the NIL era.
This team was eminently more likable than last year's team. And I think that mattered. I think that mattered over the course of the journey. And it's going to be hard in this new age of college football with how fractured these teams are, with how they come together, to really develop a chemistry and a camaraderie and root for guys over a course of years. And I do think that this team helped in that regard. You saw the way people rallied around Ernest Green with his story, and especially with the stuff that his father is dealing with at this moment in time. You see the way CJ Allen fights back from injury at the end of the year, and I think really endears himself to a lot of people to what he meant to this program. There was something about the chemistry with this team that I think was much improved from the 2024 team, and I'll be interested in seeing the bonds formed by this year, by all the close games, by all the tough games. If this team sticks together over the course of the transfer portal, which closes next Friday, if this team sticks together, I think the closeness of this team is only going to further help in 2026, like I think you sort of saw with that 2021 team, with some of the things and the adversity that they battled during the 2020 season, that really paid off for them come 2021.
Yeah, so for me personally, I think the one thing that I will really remember from this season is if I go back to the very beginning and really even up until the Florida game, we literally had zero idea who this team was. A new quarterback, an almost entirely new offensive line, 3 first-round defenders gone. I mean, the expectation, and you harped on this too, was no expectation. And then you get to the end of the season, and the expectation was a national championship. And even though it didn't work out that way, you still have to take into account the mindset shift of this team, not just within themselves, but also within the public eye. So I would go as far to say is this was Kirby Smart's best coaching job. Apart from Brett Thorson, no preseason first-team All-Americans, no one who was a consensus preseason first-rounder. We didn't even know who the best player was going to be. And on top of that, the defense was a total liability throughout the first part of the season, but we watched them get better in real time, and I think a lot of that had to do with the coaching, not even just Kirby Smart, but I would put Mike Bobo in there as well, too.
The last thing you mentioned there, Kaylee, the biggest difference between the 2025 team and the 2024 team and what the 2026 team is going to have to do. The 2025 team got better over the course of the season, and the 2024 team never really did that. I think their best game was their first game against Clemson. You saw this Georgia team continue to improve throughout the season. Now, ultimately, it's not enough to beat Ole Miss at the end of the year, and I think that serves as a great reminder going into 2026 that you always need to be getting better. But it sounds like they have a lot of those key pieces on this team for next season, guys who are committed to improving all the time, of knowing, hey, that's what it takes to make it in this world of college football. And we talked about it as a touch point this year at times. There were only a handful of guys, your Brett Thorsons, your Oscar Delps, that were on that 2022 national championship team. Every single guy that is going to be on next year's team, with maybe the exception of Ernest Green and Drew Bobo, were not on that final 2022 national championship team. And so that's going to make next year's team, in theory, all the more hungry to go out there and prove and show that they can go out there and win a national championship and continue to keep Georgia at that incredibly high standard.
So I just want to give one final overarching thought, and I hope that you'll do the same. I mean, obviously, it's really weird that it's over. And yeah, maybe it wasn't the ending a lot of people were anticipating, but don't let that final game overshadow the accomplishments and the moments that made people proud to be a Georgia fan. I mean, we know that in the blink of an eye, the season's going to be here already, and a lot of these guys are going to be coming back, which makes me a lot more optimistic going into this upcoming one than the last one. So don't let that final loss overshadow everything that we just talked about, because there are so many other things that this Georgia team should be remembered for than the Sugar Bowl loss.
Yeah, if you're a Georgia fan, I sit here and ask you, would you rather have Georgia's season or Texas's season? I think you take Georgia. Would you rather be Georgia or Alabama as a program right now? I think you'd rather be Georgia. I'll throw Ohio State in there as well. Would you rather have Georgia season where they won their conference championship and lost in the Elite Eight, or would you rather be Ohio State, who lost in the Elite Eight but didn't win the Big Ten? Georgia still had a great season among the college football playoff heavyweights. And even though, again, they've got some things to figure out moving forward, this is still an incredibly proud team and program to be a part of. And it's something we're going forward, even, yes, as disappointing as that loss was. I think Georgia has shown that they have an understanding of how to navigate and how to handle this modern era of college football. They just need a little more bounces or breaks to go their way if they're going to get back to that championship standard.
And even though the season's over, the season is never really over, because what we're going to do here in just a minute is talk about all the things that have happened since transfer portal, draft declarations, and we'll do some preview of the games tonight. But before we do that, I want to talk about how excited we are to partner with Zachariah Law Firm, because what makes them so unique is that they're the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people bitten by dogs as well as those who have been knocked down by dogs. They literally wrote the book on how to win these cases. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, give them a call at 833-GA-DOGBITE. That's DOGBITE, or check out their website at ZachariahLaw.com. And now we'll do Dog Bites. All right, let's start with some good news for the first show of 2026, and that is Georgia linebacker Raylan Wilson is coming back. And I wasn't really sure how this was going to go until after the Sugar Bowl, and, you know, they asked Raylan, what are you planning to do? And he's like, I don't really know yet. And then Jeff, believe it or not, asked him, does this loss impact your decision? And he just gave like a sad yes. And in that moment, I was like, okay, he's pulling the Nick Chubb, the Sony Michel. He's coming back. And this is really, really big for this Georgia linebacker room coming up, because they are going to be on the younger side along with Chris Cole and Justin Williams coming back too.
Yeah, you lose C.J. Allen, which is to be expected. He's going to be a first-round draft pick. And I know there's some people out there that probably naturally worry, well, if Raylan Wilson is coming back, what does that mean for Chris Cole? What does that mean for Justin Williams? I think this is great for them. I think it allows Georgia to spread those reps out and continue to put guys like Chris Cole, guys like Zayden Walker in positions where they thrive in, rushing the passer, or in Chris Cole's case, in pass defense there. And you're not pigeonholing them to just be an off-ball inside linebacker on an every-down basis like they would need to be if Raylan Wilson is gone. Raylan Wilson clearly still has things to prove. I think his career arc is mirroring that of Small Munden a little bit, though he's been obviously healthier than Munden has. And Munden meant a lot to that 2024 team and what he brought to them, and I think it's going to be the same for Raylan Wilson at Georgia.
All right, so let's talk about the people who have declared for the draft. Now, this is not going to include people who have exhausted their eligibility. So right now, there's only 3. It's going to be C.J. Allen, Zachariah Branch, and Christian Miller. So apart from those guys, I mean, who are the pivotal players that still need to make a decision that haven't exhausted? I mean, Monroe Freeling is the obvious one that comes to mind, but is there anybody else that you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, Freeling is first and foremost the most important. If I had to guess today, I would probably bet that he is in fact going to turn pro. I think he's going to get an NFL draft grade that's going to make it hard for him to turn down. I think that makes the situation with Ernest Green all the more important for Georgia and what they're going to need there. And then, look, we all expect him to come back, but Gunnar Stockton is at least worth watching until that is officially announced. You always sort of wonder what could go there. I don't expect him to be an NFL quarterback next season, but until the official announcement is made from Stockton, it's important to try and retain him and bring him back for what he means to that offense moving forward.
So this is a question really just based off of personal interest, because one of my bold predictions before the season started is I thought that Georgia would end up having 2 players that would be drafted in the first round. Knowing all the guys that are already in it, do you think that my wish could come true?
I think it could. I think that I think CJ Allen is fairly close to a lock. I think you're going to see Monroe Freeling push up in there. I wouldn't be surprised if Christian Miller nails the pre-draft process and you see him rise up. And then a guy like Zachariah Branch, he's going to fall in that 20 to 50 range. So that means he could be a first-round pick if the right team identifies him as a needy wide receiver. But at the same point in time, we've seen guys like that fall. Ladd McConkey went 34th overall. I think that's a similar range there for Zachariah Branch. But I do think that Georgia does, in fact, get multiple first-round picks this year.
All right, so now let's talk about the transfer portal. Now Georgia now has 2 transfer portal pickups, safety Khalil Barnes and now wide receiver Isaiah Canyon. But I more so want to focus on the guys that are going, and just to give you a reminder of where we're at, here's who's in the portal from Georgia. You've got Janelle Aguero, Bo Hughley, Jordan Thomas, Roderick Robinson, Andre Evans, Daniel Harris, Pierce Sperling, Chris Jones, Jaden Harris, and Nair Daniels. Is there anybody else from this Georgia program that you expect to be on this list in the coming days?
Expect maybe a little bit unfair, as these things can go back and forth, in terms of who might go in. There are certainly positions and players that are worth watching. I think that running back position is important there to watch going forward. Also, while we are recording this, Georgia has literally landed a commitment. Braylon Conley, the USC cornerback, he visited Georgia over this past weekend, someone who Dante Williams has ties to. So Georgia busy in the transfer portal today. Yes, they've seen 10 guys move on, and they're probably going to have a few more, but we've already seen them make 3 additions, 2 of them in the secondary, with Braylon Conley of USC being the most recent.
Out of that group, I mean, is there anybody that's going to be super difficult to replace, or is it just that next man up mentality that we've seen from Georgia over the last few years?
The most interesting departure to this point in time is Bo Hughley, and part of that is because I wonder if he was informed at all by what Monroe Freeling is doing there, and you would think if Freeling goes pro, he would have been someone who could have stepped in there at that left tackle position. Janelle Aguero's departure is similar to that of Jamon Dumas-Johnson from a few years ago, where he left. Georgia replaced him with CJ Allen, and CJ went on to be a first-team All-American. I could see the same thing sort of happening with Rayshawn Dinkins.
All right, so as this show is taking place, the Fiesta Bowl is going on. So, I mean, do you have a preference of who wins this game? And, I mean, who do you think has a better shot of winning the national championship between these 2 teams? Because in my mind, I think Miami has a higher ceiling but a lower floor. So I'm not really sure who would end up being the better matchup in the national championship.
Yeah, I'm rooting for Ole Miss. I just think with what they're going through, specifically how Lane Kiffin seems to meddle with this program and everything that comes with that, I'd be very much excited to see Ole Miss get through. I think it represents what this college football playoff is about, and giving an Ole Miss team that obviously deserved to be in the college football playoff a chance to go out there and win their way to the end. A Trinidad Chambliss, who is going to come up later in our Tired and Wired segment. But to your point, Kaylee, I do think Miami has a better chance of winning the national title. And so if you were asking me which of these teams is more likely to win it all, I would say Miami. But I will be rooting, I think, squarely for Ole Miss tonight, just in terms of what they mean and for what that program has had to deal with of late.
And for those of you who did not know, because Georgia has never played in the Fiesta Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl tradition is that they have a rhinoceros that picks the winner. The rhinoceros picked Ole Miss. So, I don't know, maybe he's siding with you on this, Connor. He just wants to see him win. Now we'll talk about the Peach Bowl tomorrow night at 7:30, Oregon versus Indiana. I mean, for me, I'm really personally excited about the coaching battle here, because I feel like in some ways Dan Lanning and Kurt Cignetti might be similar in terms of their coaching style, but it's just like Dan Lanning has 10 more cups of coffee than Cignetti every single day. With how the Rose Bowl played out, I think Indiana is making it tough not to root for them, but I'm potentially excited to get some more Kurt Cignetti memes coming out of this game.
Yeah, there's the comparison to Bob Parr, or Bob Parr's not the character's name, but Bob Parr's boss from The Incredibles that Kurt Cignetti bears some resemblance to. But I'm excited for this game. I'm interested in seeing the adjustments that Oregon makes. We've seen Georgia win in its rematch after losing the first time. Ole Miss beating Georgia in a rematch there. Can Oregon do the same? But I just think this Indiana program right now is a juggernaut, and I think that with what Cignetti has them doing, I'm so impressed with the way they play, the way they systematically just picked apart Alabama. And I know they lost their quarterback in that game. Ty Simpson could have played the half. They were not winning that game. And so with what Cignetti has done with Indiana, as just an appreciator and lover of football, it's been hard to not be impressed with the way that they have gone out there and played and executed every single week.
Last thing on this, I mean, do you have a preference for who you would like to see win it all, or I mean, do you not care at this point?
I don't really care at this point. I think I'd be fine with anyone but Miami winning the national title. Indiana and the story that they've done, and then maybe potentially being a new power. Oregon, I think, being a nice mashup. We're going to recruit at a really high level out of the high school ranks, but also do well in the transfer portal. I mean, Ole Miss, just with the adversity that they've had to deal with. And then, of course, Miami, again, I don't love that program. I have some questions there, but I think of those, Miami's the only one that I'd be okay with not winning.
It's funny because there was really no right or wrong answer to that question, but I think that is the right answer. Is the mentality at this point is anybody but Miami. I think moving forward, I would like to see Ole Miss win it because I think that's the ultimate form of karma to Lane Kiffin, and the way things that played out is we didn't need you to do it. And I more so would like to see that for the Ole Miss players, not the fan base, not the program, the players themselves. And it's hard to not like a guy like Trinidad Chambliss, who you said we'll talk about later. So we're going to keep moving on. We'll do Meme Machine in just a second. We'll have Cody Chaffins come on. But one of my New Year's resolutions is to ask more of you guys. And one thing that you can do to help us on the show is to like and subscribe to our DawgNation YouTube page. You can like this video down below and also subscribe to our channel. With transfer portal and everything else going on, it really never ends. There's so much content, so many things still to talk about. So to get all information on all things Georgia football, make sure to ring that bell right next to subscribe. That way you get notifications anytime that DawgNation post. All right, so now we will go ahead and bring in our good friend Cody Chaffins, and we'll do Meme Machine.
Who's that going down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's a Meme Machine and Randy Black. It's a Meme Machine and Randy Black. No, no!
There he is. Before we get started, do you have a New Year's resolution, Cody? We haven't seen you since last year.
Yeah, be better on Meme Machine. Have funnier memes. Just keep, stepping forward, bringing it everywhere, every day.
That's a good one. I'm going to kick us off this week, and I have to admit, after the loss, I really tried to be on my phone as little as possible because I just didn't want to see what everyone's saying. So this actually comes pre-Sugar Bowl, and I will take a shot at this person anytime I get the chance to. So this one goes out to our friend Marcus Freeman. It says the founding fathers used less ink writing the Constitution. I mean, it's just really, really bad. Just when you think it can't get any worse, it continues to somehow. And I feel like, from a girl's perspective, that's a conventionally handsome man. A lot of people can admit that, but this is really making the style points go down for Marcus Freeman. So I hate it for him. I truly do.
The hair polish is certainly something here for Mr. Freeman.
It reminds me I need to shine my shoes.
I just feel like it makes him a lot more unlikable in a way. I don't know. We thought Ryan Day was bad. This is really, really bad.
It, like you said, he's a good-looking dude.
That's what I'm saying. All right, Cody, what you got for us?
Audio clip, and it kind of goes back to the start of today's show. This was on TikTok. Lady named Candace. This kid is praying during the Sugar Bowl. Please, Georgia. Please let him miss the field goal.
Oh, buddy. My favorite player is Zach Branch. He was my favorite player going back in. I don't want to see him in. It's okay. He was my favorite player of the team. Oh, buddy.
I don't know if he's going to go to the NFL or not.
I hope he does. He does love him. We had this really good team and made it all the way here and just lost. I can't believe that. Congratulations, Lucas. Y'all play good.
congratulations, Ole Miss. Y'all played good. And he said he's going to miss his favorite player, Zach Branch. And he's sad that it's all
devastating.
coming to an end. And I feel like this is a lot of Dog fans.
I know. It's not funny, but it's funny.
This poor kid.
I know.
And his mom posted it, and apparently Zach Branch has reached out and said, "Thanks, little bro. We appreciate the love that you're showing me." But he is all of us, right? You realize, oh man, this thing is actually ending, and then oh yeah, these guys are done. And I think Kaylee, like you talked about, in that locker room, well, it wasn't the locker room, but the interview room afterwards, I think it was hitting all those guys smack in the face because that game wasn't decided until so late.
Yeah, I also love that. I'm assuming this is Dad next to him. Dad is unfazed until like the very end of the video. But I mean, I imagine that this was not the only prayer that was said that Georgia didn't miss that field goal or Ole Miss missed that field goal. So this is like the prayer heard around DawgNation.
That dad has experienced some heartbreak before in his life. Like
Right.
This
kid's only 6. He's only known since 2021 Georgia football.
Yeah.
What a year for child Georgia fans between the one that wouldn't sing Rocky Top and this one right here. I mean, the kids have really delivered this season. So maybe that's another thing that this Georgia team should be remembered for is the child reactions. So, hey, New Year's resolution, I think you accomplished that at least in this first one back, Cody. That was
right.
stellar.
Keep trying to hold up my end of the bargain.
I don't know how you're going to top that, Connor, but you can try.
Yeah, so this is social media. This is from Nugget Chef. College football is just the process of saying every team is a fraud when they lose until you get to the champion, who is inevitably also a fraud because every other team has already been exposed as a fraud. So who did they really beat? Right now, in my opinion, the only team in college football that is not yet a fraud in this season is, in fact, Indiana. They are the last remaining unbeaten team in the college football playoff here. They beat Oregon again. Oregon lost to Indiana twice, fraudulent. And then, Miami, they lost to SMU, and Louisville, they're clearly a fraud. You can make a case that Ole Miss is not a fraud because they have avenged their lone loss coming against Georgia. You can say that they've beaten every team they've played on their schedule. But I'm putting all these teams on fraud watch, and I'm questioning, now that Georgia's not going to win the national title, are any of these teams true legit national championship worthy?
Yeah, Indiana's still up in the air for me. Like, the jury's still out on Indiana. They could be a fraud. They could get blown out in the national championship, and then everybody's a fraud.
But that's what gets, like, these teams are good, and it's okay to call them good. They don't all have to be frauds. And, like, even if Georgia would have won the national championship, they're not 2021 Georgia, so they're frauds. Bro, we cannot appreciate, and this is the whole point of this show, we cannot appreciate college football anymore because it is national championship or bust, it feels like, for everybody.
This is
Bingo.
Mount Rushmore DGD all over again.
Oh,
I thought that's where we were
just gets me fired up. And I had to listen to, appreciate the moments. Like you guys said off the top. I totally agree.
I am going to also appreciate the fact that we actually get to watch some college football this weekend, a rare thing. So I'm excited to be able to sit back and watch and judge all of the frauds out there that are playing this weekend. So we're going to continue to move forward. But I know that with the new year starting, a lot of people are going back to work. You're a little bit busier. Maybe you're on the road more. And so there is an option for you guys to listen to us in podcast format, whether you're in the car, whether you're cleaning your house. If it's a little bit more convenient for you, you can listen to all of our DawgNation shows on our DawgNation podcast feed, wherever you consume your music or podcast. So just consider that as another option. Maybe that works a little bit better for you, but it's still a good way to listen to the show without having to tune in each and every week. So make sure to check out our DawgNation podcast feed. So we could have done a million things for our fun segment, but just seeing kind of the reactions from everyone throughout the Sugar Bowl, at the end of the Sugar Bowl, I thought it was a good time for us to kick off the year with Tired versus Wired. A year later, and it still gets the people going. You know what I mean? So we'll just do one set of each. I will go first in mine, and I will go ahead and get my Northwest Georgia bias out of the way because, you knew it was coming. Wired, Sokobe White had his moment in the Sugar Bowl, and this was like a really cool special moment for me because his coach through me sent him a video and basically said, if your moment's tomorrow or if your moment's next year, you know what you're capable of. I didn't realize his moment would come that soon, and yeah, it may have been one of the smaller moments of the game, but for a player like Sokobe White, that means everything, and I think that's a really good it's very symbolic of the future because he stayed. I thought maybe there was a chance that he might be one of the players that we showed earlier in the transfer portal. But I think that was a really big moment for him. And as a fellow Northwest Georgia gal, that was probably one of the more wired moments of the game for me. But again, like Connor's going to tell you, that's just because I'm super biased, obviously. Tired.
This was a great moment to see, especially late in that game, the fourth quarter catch that he had on what ended up being a game-tying drive there for Georgia. Georgia's going to be counting on a guy like Sokobe White next season to see an uptick in snaps to play a more important role. And I think with Sokobe in particular, that's one area where Gunnar needs to get better is throwing over the middle of the field, targeting the slot, and not in a screen manner. And I think the way in which Sokobe brought down that pass to really put Georgia in the red zone there, I think that's really encouraging going into the next season for what he might ultimately be able to bring to this team.
Wow, you agree with me. I'm so glad. I was a little bit worried about that one. That's why I did it first. Tired. Let me tell you, and I know this is just overreaction, but I happen to have the DawgNation Facebook account logged into my phone so I can see all the messages that come into DawgNation. And after the game, I'm sitting there waiting on the players. There's like 8 or 9 messages back to back, all from different people. Fire Kirby Smart, fire Kirby Smart, fire Kirby Smart. I'm like, are you serious right now? I know y'all had the same reaction after Alabama, and yes, maybe that felt like the worst moment in the world, but still, we talked about it earlier. I thought this season was his best coaching job, if not one of the best. So let's just go ahead and get over that hump because I just can't think of another person that DawgNation would rather have as the coach rather than Kirby Smart. So yes, I know it's all about the heat of the moment, but absolutely tired. Fire Kirby Smart. Do not do that, please.
I thought you were going to come in here and talk about that same sort of line with Mike Bobo. Like, yeah, Kirby Smart got out coached in that game. Mm-hmm. I still don't think there's anybody else out there that I'd rather have running a college football program right now than Kirby Smart with the way he manages things on a day-to-day basis, with the way that he has built Georgia to sustain and all the winning he has done in his 10 years at the University of Georgia. So, yeah, his game management's not perfect, and I think that showed up there in that game against Ole Miss, and that's perhaps what makes it all more disappointing. But like, who are you going to go out there and get that's better than Kirby Smart? The answer is you're not.
Yeah, and I fear, like it'd become an Alabama type of situation where you're just destined to fail coming in after somebody that iconic. It would have to come from within. So let's just go ahead and put a stop to that because I do think that Kirby is capable of adapting to the new ways and recognizing what he needs to do because that's what a good coach does. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to you for your first set of tired versus wired.
Yeah, my first wired is Trinidad Chambliss. We've talked about Georgia's issues and why they lost that game, and there were certainly things that they could have done better. Trinidad Chambliss was also just absolutely amazing in that game. And yeah, Georgia, probably should have brought him down a couple of times, and that would have helped. I mean, the accuracy that he showed in that game, specifically pushing the ball downfield, I thought Georgia's cornerbacks, for the most part, were in good position to make plays on the football. And Chambliss just put it where exactly it needed to be. 362 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, got Ole Miss exactly what they needed. I thought Kewan Lacey had a really good game, not just with his ability to run the ball and earn some tough yards, but his pass protection, in my opinion, was exceptional in that game. And so, look, I know Georgia probably lost that game, but Trinidad Chambliss did everything he could to help Georgia or to help Ole Miss win that game. And I think he deserves a ton of credit for doing that.
Yeah, I saw a lot of comments on social media after the game about the quarterbacks from Trinidad Chambliss and Gunnar Stockton. Like, that's just 2 guys that it's very easy to root for, very easy to play for because you see how hard they go for their team. So one of the most likable quarterback matchups we've seen across this entire college football season between those 2 guys.
Yeah, and so, again, like, Gunnar wasn't bad in that game. Like, there were things he could have done better, and I think that Trinidad Chambliss is a tough juxtaposition for that because he did everything right for Ole Miss in that game. Moving on to my first tired, Todd Monken. Todd Monken is currently unemployed as the Baltimore Ravens have made a head coaching change. And there are naturally a lot of Georgia fans out there thirsting after him to come back to Georgia and work his magic, being the offensive coordinator that won 2 national titles here in Athens. I'm here to tell you that is not going to happen. We have to move on and move past this Todd Monken pipe dream. Look, he was a great play caller. He did a lot here in his time at Georgia. Todd Monken also had zero desire to go out there and recruit and bring in players and bring in talent. And I think part of the reason you've seen some talent drop off here at the University of Georgia in recent years is because Monken wasn't going out on the trail and going out and landing players that were of Georgia's caliber there in that regard. I believe Mike Bobo is wholeheartedly a better recruiter than Todd Monken is, and I think that ultimately matters at the end of the day. So I know there are a lot of people out there that want Todd Monken to come back now that he's no longer the Ravens offensive coordinator. I'm just here to tell you that's not happening. And I also don't necessarily think that you should want that in this day and age where I think talent acquisition is more important than it ever has been.
Yeah, it's tricky because undeniably a terrific play caller, but undeniably also had a lot of talent that was recruited before he came in. And I feel like now in the state of college football, apart from the money, one thing that you hear high school recruits say a lot is like, they need that validation, or they didn't check in on me enough, or they weren't talking to me enough, or they didn't show me enough love. And I think that Todd Monken would not be able to fix that issue or be able to have that personal relationship with these guys that Mike Bobo does. So I knew as soon as I saw that Georgia fans were going to have something to say about it, but I'm glad that you addressed it because I think that was the right way to go about it. For me, I will give my next and last set of tired versus wired. Wired, and this is kind of just me going based on assumption, but it feels like it's going to be real. The fact that this was probably the last time that Georgia's ever going to have a bye and not have a home playoff game, because I feel like that was something that was really lacking, is congratulations, you won the SEC championship, you get a bye week, and you basically get to go play an away game because Ole Miss had the geographical advantage, and it showed because it really felt like an away game. And I think the atmosphere had a lot to do with some of the momentum bouts that we saw. But just knowing that the future of college football, this is a change for the good when they eventually hopefully go to the 16 and Georgia's going to get the chance to not have the bye and be able to host a home playoff game potentially if they're seeded that high. So the end of all of that kind of made me realize that that was probably the end of that era. We're going to eventually enter a new one. And the fact that Georgia could have home games and no byes in the future, that gets me wired for what's to come.
I'll say this about Ole Miss fans. Look, Georgia's benefited from the past, from playing games. You know, in the Peach Bowl, you think that 2022 Ohio State game, and Georgia fans travel incredibly well. This is nothing against them. It is more in praise of Ole Miss fans. Georgia fans have not blocked out a building like that in quite some time. And that is a credit to the Ole Miss fans. That is them rallying around that team. And like, yes, you know, they haven't been in a college football playoff game. They've been to the Sugar Bowl in recent years. I believe this was their third trip in the past decade. So like, they're used to making that trip. They showed out in that game early on. And, you know, yes, they had the color advantage. They had a noise advantage that was even greater, in my opinion, than the, you know, population advantage that you saw in there. So my tip of the cap there goes to Ole Miss and the fans and the way they found a way to make an impact in that game.
I felt that way about Ole Miss last year when Georgia went on the road, because it's not one of the bigger stadiums in the SEC, but the fans made it feel like it was a lot bigger, and I thought they did a good job of that in the Sugar Bowl as well. So, again, credit to them, but also to just moving forward. I think it would be awesome for Georgia to host a home playoff game so they can have that type of feeling to the game. My tired, anytime that Lane Kiffin wants to make a situation about him, especially at this point in time, like at first, you know, you just say, oh, it's his personality and this is just how he is. But now it's just getting old. Like, we're wrapping up the college football season. The team that he used to coach is still in there. And I still feel like he just wants to take all the attention and put it on him. And naturally, that's just probably who he is. But at this point, it's just kind of exhausting and getting a little bit old for me. So that's going to be my tired, is making every possible situation about himself when there are other things right now that are more important and that we should be focusing on.
Yeah, my tired, I'm going to start with this here. I thought about going Trinidad Chambliss here, like the fact that he's pushing for a 6 year of eligibility. I think we need to get away from that model because it only makes college football feel more like minor leagues if we have guys sticking around longer and longer. But my tired is tied into Kaylee's tired here. It's Damon Williams. And maybe a lot of SEC fans didn't know who Damon Williams was before this week. He's the quarterback at the University of Washington. On January 2nd, he signed a deal with Washington to come back for another year. He has now announced that he is going to be entering the transfer portal. Because of the contract that he signed, Washington does not have to put him into the transfer portal. This whole situation is a mess. And look, I know it speaks to the way in the world in which college football is, But I put a lot of this on Damon Williams himself. Nobody forced him to sign that initial contract with Washington on January 2nd. And every step of the way, his representation has departed ways with him now, and he's having to go find new representation to represent him as he tries and gets and finds a new spot. It is believed LSU is the team that is trying to entice him to leave Washington. This is the kind of stuff that turns casual football fans away from college football. And I hope that everyone takes a step back and sort of realizes here that, yeah, chasing the ultimate bag, getting the most amount of money is not good at all, not just for the short term, but the long-term health of this sport. So this Damon Williams situation, which I believe Lane Kiffin is prominently involved in, is just a black eye for the entire sport, and I think it makes the sport less fun as a whole.
And not even just the long term for the sport, but the long term for these players too. Like NFL teams recognize this stuff. Like you don't think that you're going to have to answer for your crimes if that's eventually what you want to do. I think that's a really big turnoff for them. And I think it's one of those things that you're really looking at the short term instead of the long term. And for a lot of these kids, their dream was to be a high draft pick, and they're only hurting themselves by making decisions that benefit them for just the moment and not for the rest of their lives. So I'm glad that you addressed this.
Yeah, it's something that is quite frankly disgusting, and I wish I could have more sharply pointed words, but this is not exactly the forum to do that. My last wire, though, it is the college football playoff. And look, I know it's disappointing that Georgia went one and done again. If you're a Georgia fan, I totally adhere to the idea that like this sucks, and if this was Georgia in a 4-team playoff, you'd feel a lot better about their season. This were the BCS, Georgia's probably playing for a national title against Indiana at this point. But I think with what we saw in those 4 games, you got a little bit of everything. You saw Miami and Ole Miss spring the upsets there. You also saw some flaws in the ways things can get better. You know, Texas Tech getting a bye and then just not scoring a single point. And I'll say this too about Texas Tech. You spend all that money. You spend $30, maybe even $40 million on your roster to score a grand total of 0 points in the college football playoff. That's not a good look. And then the Indiana just destruction of Alabama, I think sometimes showing us that there probably aren't always 8 teams that are worthy of being the final 8 and playing for a spot in the college football playoff. Again, it's not perfect. They're going to try and tinker and mess with it some more. But I think with what we've seen from the college football playoff thus far, the Miami-Texas A&M game, the Georgia-Ole Miss game, it's given us great theater. And on that side of the bracket, it's given us 2 teams that I don't think a lot of people pre-tournament would have said would have gotten to this point, and now thus have a chance to get to a national championship depending on how things go in the Fiesta Bowl on Thursday. So I think from a game on field standpoint, we've liked everything we've seen thus far, except obviously Georgia losing in the college football playoff.
Yeah, it was a strong start and a strong finish for the quarterfinals. Oregon, Texas Tech is what it is. Like you said, I think it exposed some things. But it was interesting after I finally got to look at my phone after the Sugar Bowl to see how united the college football world was, that Indiana beat Alabama. And there were so many good memes. But they were so good that I couldn't use them on the show because that would be inappropriate. But it was a great night for Twitter after that particular game. So that's going to be the end of Tired versus Wired for the end of this current season. Connor, you're the last person I've asked this question to end things. What are some of your New Year's resolutions?
Big one is to be more social this year. Just go out, do a little bit more, talk to friends, go put myself out there and do a little bit more in that regard this year.
So I actually have a New Year's resolution for the both of us, so you can really think this through. I think you and I collectively together have to stop beating so many dead horses. It's hard not to, but I feel like for us, let's grow a lot with the show in 2026 and maybe leave some of those things that we continue to bring up behind. And I think collectively together, we could do that with the help of Cody. So that's my New Year's resolution for us, if that's okay with you.
Yes. Also, I just, it's interesting. No touchdown predictions mentioned on today's show after Cody once again cleaned up our clocks with the way things went down there at the Sugar Bowl.
Well, guys, you're going to have to tune in next week to hear the final results from touchdown prediction that Connor just so happened to spoil. But we'll break it all down. It's going to be next week's show, so make sure to join us for that. With that, we thank you so much for joining us here on DawgNation at Large. And don't forget, touchdown predictions next week. We'll see you then.